Welcome to Empowered Living. I'm Ann Chu. On this podcast, innovative leaders and visionary experts share insights and practical tools for work, family, and marriage. Each episode, we'll explore how to elevate your life while staying grounded in what truly matters to you. You're working hard to navigate relationships, build a thriving family, and create a legacy of purpose. We're here to help you do that with confidence and intentionality. So if you're ready to live a life by design, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Empowered Living. I'm your host, Ann Chu, and today's conversation is one I've been excited to share. My guest is Rob Dube, longtime entrepreneur, mindfulness teacher, and co-creator of the 10 Disciplines. Rob built and scaled a successful company, but the work that defines him now centers on stillness, surrender, and the very human practice of letting go. In this conversation, we talk about what slowing down actually looks like for high achievers and why it doesn't have to cost you your edge. We also chat about what shows up when you stop pushing and start paying attention. And then Rob opens up about how he manages his own energy with a level of clarity and discernment that most of us rarely give ourselves permission to access. It's honest, it's grounding, and it invites you to rethink how you move through the world so you can make more space for what matters most. Let's dive in. Welcome, Rob. I can't wait to spend some time with you today. How are you?
I'm great, Ann. Great to see you as always. So excited to chat with you. I've been telling my wife how excited I was to see you, and I don't even care that we're on a podcast. I just like that we get to talk.
I agree. Same. I feel the same way. So, and just added bonus that we're going to record this and that we'll get to revisit it later.
Well, hopefully for the listeners, it'll be an added bonus. I don't know. We'll see. If it's not, it's my fault, I promise.
Oh, no. It's going to be great. Okay, so let's dive in. You have
Okay.
built and scaled hugely successful business, yet so much of the work that you're doing now really focuses on stillness. So can you share a little bit about that shift and the shift from doing to really being?
Uh-huh. Okay. So in my early 30s, I sold my company and I ended up buying it back. And during that period of time, I was experiencing stress and anxiety at all-time highs in my life, which were already pretty high to begin with. So I was curious about what might be out there that could help me manage my anxiety. I figured there had to be ways to do that. And there are many, as you know. One for me that I seem to resonate with was meditation. And I learned that practice and have continued on with that practice now for, I think it's been, well over 20 years. And in addition to that, I began taking silent retreats for 7 to 10 days about 15 or more years ago. And I've been doing that every single year as just part of what I do. And so back to your question about stillness and being, that's been something that's been useful for me is being in stillness. So when I'm not practicing meditation formally, but I'm just going through my day, my mind feels a bit more settled, as does my body. And that has an impact on the people around me in terms of how I react to situations, like we all have. Some are small, like, we didn't get our dinner order on time or something, and we're hungry, and that's annoying, all the way to the big problems at the company or something like that. One of your best employees gave notice or something like that. And these are all things that we can manage when our mind and our bodies are settled. And stillness is one way to get there, but there are many others. So that's been useful for me. And maybe to answer your question, that's how I find it.
I want to come back to the meditation and the silent retreat in a second, but let me first ask you, because I know a lot of high achievers understand the practice of meditation and the value that it could bring, but they inherently fear that slowing down might make them lose their edge. So, What do you say to those leaders who are feeling that tension between um, this ambition and success and drive and inner peace and calm and stillness?
I mean, to your last, there's so much I want to say, but to your last point, when I think most very smart, driven people, most of them are very smart, understand that when things are going in slow motion, they're better. So whether they're in their business or with their family or whatever they have going on in life, when things are moving more slowly, which doesn't mean they are actually moving slowly. It just
Mhm.
means it's your ability to work with in that you just make better decisions and you just show up better. But when you're going fast all the time and you don't know how to settle that speed, then you make poor decisions and you don't show up as a compassionate, loving human being to the people that matter most to you, the people in your family, the employees that are working very hard to help your company be successful. And so, I think most driven people that I speak with actually don't understand meditation. They think that they're supposed to sit there and clear their mind. And then when they're done, they'll be in some sort of state of Zen, to use that word, some sort of, floaty experience or something. And that's just not the case. When you're meditating, and you have a regular practice, you're learning how to pay attention to the thoughts that are never ending in your mind. And you're working and practicing towards just finding a moment of peace. I mean, I'm talking like a second, maybe two. Yes, maybe if you practice longer, you'll experience a little bit longer, but I don't want you to have too high of expectations. So let's just call it a second or two.
Yeah.
But that's all you need. So a driven person might say, well, why would I do that for a second of peace? Well, because it's important that you understand and remember what peace is like. And then when you understand and remember that, you can use that in your everyday life because that's where it's needed most. The practice of sitting down regularly every single day is exactly what it's called, a practice. You're practicing for when you're out and about in the real world and you put it into action. So you're putting your practice into action. And so I think, driven people that I come into contact with who have a lot of questions for me about meditation typically don't actually understand, what it is and why they're even doing it. And so maybe that opens a little bit of a thought for some people listening.
And what is a sign or a symptom that maybe somebody should take up a meditation practice or practice a little more stillness? Like what are some things that we should look out for, some watch out?
Well, first, I'll preface it by saying I don't know that anybody needs meditation. So I'm not the front person for the meditation world. You have to listen to yourself. Meditation's just one thing to help manage things in your life, such as stress, anxiety, feeling guilty, shame, the list goes on, anger. You don't want to be in those states. Those are not states that you want to live in if you truly want to be free and feel peace. And when you're free and you feel peace, you show up better in the world as a loving, compassionate person, as I said before. And that's all that really matters and all anybody really cares about. And then the rest just falls into place. So your driven tendencies get heightened in a way that, you have potential for greater success in your life. Now, you it may not be the success you were bargaining for, or it may be. I don't really know because we set all kinds of goals that don't align with our true self. And we spend half our life going after them until we sometimes wake up and realize that isn't what we really wanted. But when you listen deeply to your true self and however you get there, whether it be through meditation, prayer, other modalities, journaling, you find the thing that works best for you or things, the life tools, so to speak. So you're awake And you realize and you can feel and embody when something that you're doing and that you're striving for is actually not aligned with this life for you. And the sooner that you figure that out, success might look like, you know, maybe, I hate to say it to the driven, but maybe it means you're just a better parent than you are a business person. And you can be okay with that. Maybe that's what your drive is for, is to be an amazing parent. And then, maybe they would go to one of your workshops and use all that drive to be better in their relationship and their parenting.
Why do you think it takes humans such a long time in their life journey to recalibrate and wake up to figure out what they truly want and what is actually aligned with their authentic selves? Why do we spend so much of our adult life living this other life? Like, we have all the tools. Why does it still take us so long to get to where, you know?
It's a great question. I don't completely know the answer, but I have thoughts about it. And my thoughts are that we're here to learn lessons, and some of them are painful. And we take ourselves down paths that we think are the path we want to go down, only to find out it really wasn't. But then we wouldn't have known that had we not gone down that path. So it was actually kind of important that we went down it. So, I always have had these arguments with my business partners and clients that I work with, in that I don't think you're ever failing. I never felt that we were failing at my companies, even when we weren't hitting our goals, because I always felt like we were learning, and that felt like a success to me. And as long as we learned from what didn't happen that we wanted to happen,
Mm.
and we weren't consistently repeating that, that felt like a real success to me. And I would always argue, and still do, that, as I mentioned before, we wouldn't have known those things if we didn't have those experiences. So in life, I think that we can have more equanimity when we accept things as they are, as just simply something that we need to experience in this life, and embrace it not as good or bad, but just as is, as it is. And when you don't have that angst, especially, if you don't like something, you don't like the way something's going, when you don't have that angst, it just doesn't have a hold on you. And so it's just a completely different experience. You just go through it. It's kind of easeful in a way. And hey, there's hard things in life. Like, I'm not trying to minimize or oversimplify some of these things or our emotions, because those are real too. So let's just say we have a family member who's really sick. Like, I'm not suggesting that we just say, oh, just go through it, be easeful, no big deal. I'm not saying that.
Let me know how that goes if you do that.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm saying, like, okay, you have real emotions. You're sad, you're scared, you're hopeful, so just be with the emotions. Like, understand why they're there and why they're serving you. Now, you want your family member to get better quick. Well, you can't control that. So you have to just have a conversation with yourself around, your angst around wanting this to be solved immediately, because the, hopefully it will be, but oftentimes it's not. And it just requires, another one of those life skills that most of us have a hard time with, which is patience. And I do think it's worth asking, like, okay, there's a lesson here, in part for me and in part for my family member. Now, I don't need to know what the lesson is or why, because that takes too much mental energy, and then we're in our head. So there's no point in that, usually. So you just do your best to work through things with some sense of ease, which doesn't mean you don't care.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for people to differentiate between the 2, right? The the lack of care.
I think so, because I think when you have this, especially with driven people, when you have this high intensity caring, it's as if you can solve things with brute force.
Mm,
I
mm,
will attack my family member's illness and I will do everything in my power. I will lose sleep. I will exhaust myself
mm.
to get the answer. When
Yeah,
in fact, maybe if you took care of yourself and you allowed yourself space and time, the answer might present itself because you were awake and you were paying attention and your mind was clear and fresh. And it might mean you went on a walk and an idea popped in your head about it that wouldn't have otherwise because you were just going 1,000 miles an hour and you couldn't settle yourself down and every decision you were make is filled with anxiety. I mean, anyone listening knows when you're making decisions in that from that place, they're usually not good.
right.
They're usually not good.
Listening to you, and I'm thinking, as a recovering control freak, it feels like you're asking me to let go of control, right? Like, if, for example, in your example about somebody being sick, that feels like I can take control of the situation and fix it. And you're asking me to let go of the reins a little bit and not take control, and that
Yeah.
feels hard.
Yeah. Well, for driven people that are solving problems all the time and they get a thrill out of that because they're good at it, that can be hard. Now, but first, I want to make sure I've said a few times, this doesn't mean you're not showing up and working on the problem. You most certainly are. I'm just suggesting that you probably do a better job in a calmer state
Mm,
than you will in a state of high anxiety and fear and wanting to fix things and control. I mean, again, I'm not saying anything you or anybody listening doesn't already know. You know you don't control anything. You just don't. I'm sorry. And sometimes you want something and you get that desired outcome and you convince yourself that you controlled it. But
mm.
you didn't. I'm sorry. You did not. There's other things at play and I would encourage you to think about that. Um, there's all kinds of philosophies around that, so you just find yours. But, when you let go, it doesn't mean you're giving up. That's for sure. I think you're giving space for the magic to happen.
I know that you've been taking a sabbatical every August, and that starting next year, you're going to also take a sabbatical in February. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
So tell me, like, that feels very not like a typical entrepreneur. So, how did you get comfortable with being able to step away for that amount of time and kind of along the lines of what we've already been talking about, like letting go, right? Like, how are you able to do that?
Well, first, for somebody who's considering it, you ease into it slowly. You take a couple of weeks and you don't check in, and maybe you're used to doing that. And then you try 3 weeks, and then you maybe move up to a full month or however long, you wanna do, if you wanna go longer, whatever. What are the benefits of it? Well, first, you sit in discomfort with not being connected
Mm,
and notice how you're feeling, and it's a moment of awareness that you get to learn how much being connected to your business or whatever is your career might be defining for you and might be taking up time in your life. And if that's uncomfortable, then there's a lesson there. And if it's not uncomfortable, there's also a lesson there, which is really cool because then you get to see like, wow, I can actually embrace this. And so, then you get to see how you spend time So you get to bring awareness to, are you trying to be busy all the time? Some people do that. They're going on sabbatical, but they have a full schedule.
Mm.
They're going to go to here and they're going to do this. Nothing wrong with that. But I do think when people are constantly filling their time, that they are not always being fully with themselves, because when you're not busy and you're with yourself, it can be painful. Things come up, and that's why people go on social media and all that kind of stuff all the time, because, any moment of silence is discomfort. And so you try to fill it to occupy your mind so it doesn't feel uncomfortable. So, what I like to do on sabbatical, I mean, I certainly have some plans, but I like to leave space for what might arise. So, a day where I wake up and I have no clue what's going to happen, what I'm going to do, and I call it piddling. So, I'm just piddling around. I don't know, do a little this and do that, and then take a walk. I don't know, whatever I seem to be drawn to versus like, what should I do next? It's pretty interesting. You can actually find yourself drawn to something unconsciously. And, maybe I'll pick up the phone and call Ann and just like call her,
Yeah.
just not an appointment or, on the calendar, and just see if she answers. Yeah, I encourage people, if you're not doing that already, just get back into that old school, just calling people. It's pretty amazing when that happens. Even if they don't answer, you can leave a message and, you know, just you were thinking about them or whatnot, and they'll say, "Yeah, I thought it was weird that you called me." It's fun. So, so that there's that part. And then, as far as extending it to an additional month, I was curious about what that might be like. And also I live someplace where it's very cold in February. So I was trying to think of a time of the year where, maybe I could go someplace warm. And so that's part of it too. For me, part of it at this stage of my life, I don't live really too close to most of my family. So, I want to spend time with my family. I want to make that a priority. The sabbaticals help with that. But I try to do it when I'm not on sabbatical as well. But, my parents are still alive, and they're getting older though, and they're in their 80s, and I want to spend time with them in quality time. I
Right.
just want to sit with them and just chat. And, we don't have to do anything. I don't care about that. Um, and, my siblings, they live in different cities and things like that. And we're FaceTiming and all this, but I want to spend time with them. I want to go on walks with them. I want to have, you know, dinners. I don't know when I'm going to cross the street, and that'll be my last day, my last moment. So I want to make sure that my priorities are very clear constantly. Connecting is a big part of it.
What else have you done to make sure that those priorities are being lived out every day?
Well, I try to be intentional with my time, and, I'm fortunate. And I do think, maybe there's times in life where you're building, and then maybe there's times in life where, maybe in my case, maybe I'm not building as hard or as high. And I try to look at opportunities that I'm presented with and feel, just notice how I feel, like actually in my body, not in my mind. How do I feel about this? Will it be beneficial or not? But no, I just like, if Anne reaches out to me and wants to do a podcast, my body screams yes. Like, I don't have to think about it for 1 second. That's what I want to do. Whatever comes of it, I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me. If my body is telling me yes, then I'm just going to listen, and then we'll see. We'll just see. So I'm try to be more intentional about that kind of thing, and space out my days so I have time. And I used to have, when I was younger, I'd have a lot of meetings every day, and now I have very few meetings, and sometimes I don't even know what to do. And I just want to embrace that. And like when I'm on sabbatical, like, let's just see what happens. Like, piddle for a second and see what happens. And all of a sudden there's something I'm into, and I'm feeling creative and open and flowy. And, I'm just trying to leave more space for those kinds of things. And then I think the last thing, and there may be other things, but it's just coming to my mind right now is, I do have an EA, and an executive assistant, and, I communicate clearly with her. In fact, I have a vision document, that I share with her, and she has, and her job is to make sure that I stay within those parameters that I set for myself. And it's her job to, really call me out when she thinks I'm getting into something or doing something that doesn't align with that, and to just ask me. And, sometimes I'll override it, but usually I'm really appreciative, and it makes me think, and I pause, and just think I'm really grateful that I have this person who's, in part watching out for me, and keeps me on track.
Tell us a little bit more about the silent retreats and maybe just like tactically, well, one, how has it impacted you? But then tactically, like, are you doing them on your own? Are you going through a retreat company? And how long are they? What, how do you define silence?
Yep. So the types of retreats that I go on for myself personally, they can be called a mindfulness retreat is one way they're called. Some might call it a Vipassana retreat that comes from the Buddhist tradition. Although typically these days the retreats are not, they would be considered secular, meaning there is no religious or faith teachings. It's really just the basics of meditation and mindfulness. So I go on 2 retreats per year, 7 to 10 days each. And I would say 75% of the time, it's what's called self-guided, which means I go by myself. I do go to a retreat center, and I like that because retreat centers are used to having people and or groups that are there in silence on retreat. So they know how to deal with you when you're, around the property, and they respect that you're not speaking and it makes sense. So 25% of the time I'll go into a retreat with other people just to be in community, because there's something very special about doing that. So let me speak to that for just a moment. First, when you're in community with other people, you start off, usually if they're strangers, and they usually are, and you just, you have your normal niceties, where are you from, the small talk kind of stuff. And then, good teachers will have they will be holding space, and they will set a strong container for the group. And you will be very clear about how each and every day will go. So there's no surprises. And so once they guide you into silence, which usually can take about a day, so there's a little bit of silence and a little bit of talking and a little bit of silence, etc., and that leads into full silence. Now, imagine you're in a space with 20, 30, maybe 50 people who you really don't know, and you might have had a small talk conversation with, 3 or 4 of them or something like that prior. And what ends up happening is, energetically, you are getting to know people on a whole nother level. You can feel their energy. You notice their little foibles. You notice their deep love. You notice their emotions. You feel their pain somehow from across the room, even though, you're really just focused on yourself, but you do, you're human. You look around, you see people, just simple glances. And I'm sharing this because what I'm hoping the listener will take away from it is that we can communicate with each other without speaking. And we can do that with strangers that we have within us. And unless we experience it, we don't know. We don't know. It's a hard thing to pick up on. I remember there was one retreat, I was behind this woman, and I never really saw the front of her face. All I saw was the back of her head, and she would wear her hair in a bun, and it reminded me of my daughter. And there were times where, and I'm kind of feeling that way right now, there were times where I would look at her bun and I would just start crying because it just reminded me of how much I love my daughter. And it just went so deep. Just seeing this woman's bun. And I said to her after, I said, I shared with her that story and the impact that she had on me unknowingly because I was just sitting behind her. And it was really a beautiful thing. So, these are the sorts of experiences that one might have in community in silence. And at the end, when you start speaking and your conversations aren't so small talky anymore, it's really odd. The first time I went to a meditation retreat with other people and I heard them talking to each other, at the end, I thought they must have been friends for a long time. And I came to find out they didn't know each other at all. And so the connection just ran very deep in silence. And so, a typical silent retreat would involve sitting in silence for, anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes at a time. And then in between that, you'll do walking meditations. You'll do some type of movement like stretching or yoga, or they usually give you the opportunity to do whatever it is that you're comfortable with. And then sometimes the teachers will do some talks. They'll explain, some things about meditation as you've been experiencing it for 1 or 2 days that might be little tidbits that help you understand that, yes, it's normal that you're feeling a little bit of back pain or something like that. And here's how you can work with that. And here's how you can change your position, things of that nature. Now, one more thing I'll share, and this applies to whether you're in community or on your own, and that is after about the third day, your mind really begins to settle. The first few days, you're still living in your, day-to-day world. So you just have all that stuff flying around in your head. It's just constant. It's like the chatter will not stop. But then all of a sudden in that third day, and it's a pretty common experience for people that attend the retreats, things start to settle. And you start to say, oh, wow, I'm really settling down here. And then what happens in the third, fourth day, fifth day, some deeper stuff can start to come up. And that's can be scary for some people if you don't want that to come up. But it's a beautiful thing because you get to sit with it and you get to work through it. And you do. That's what happens. You end up working through it on your own with your own powers, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then you find peace again. And you're like, wow, I spent a couple hours in the morning on the fourth day and I was in a lot of pain. And then I felt great the rest of the time. I just felt so easeful. So that's a common type of experience that people have, but it's not always the case. And I always like to say, have no expectations because you just don't know how it's going to play out. You might just be there to learn and refine your practice and deepen it. Because when you've meditated for 7 days for 20 to 40 minutes at a time, and then you go home, if you to sit down and meditate one time a day for 20 minutes, it's like child's play. It's like no problem. So it really helps you to be dedicated to a daily practice. So yeah, hopefully that.
That's super helpful. Thank you. Can you share about the 10 disciplines and what that work is about?
Yeah. So as you know, our friend Gino Wickman, he's really good at, kind of taking things that, we are exposed to in our lives and maybe putting them together in a way where, we can kind of work it as a system almost, so obviously EOS, which you're very involved with, is a system for running a company. The 10 disciplines came up for him because he had to give a talk to, I think it was the EOS conference, and he was thinking about things that were helpful in his life. And I think he came up with 15 or 20 or something, and he narrowed it down to 10 of the most impactful things. And when he shared them with me, I realized that through our 20-year friendship, he had actually taught me a lot of those things, not all of them, but I would say it was 7 out of 10, where I was just sort of gleaning these things off of him. And I would ask him a lot of questions about him. So when he put them together in a list, I said, these are really impactful. I've experienced 7 of them on my own, and there's 3 new ones that I think are fantastic. And what we realized is that when we put the 10 together, any one of us, it serves as a foundation in our life, a really strong foundation. And that foundation helps us create more actual time in our life. And when we have that time back, we have space in our mind. And when you have space in your mind, going back to a lot of the things we spoke about earlier, we make better decisions. We make those decisions, as we say in our book, Shine, from love, or we just feel more love. It's not always about decisions. It's just about our energy. And so whether you use the 10 disciplines as your foundation or you have your own set of foundational things, they're all important and all good. And I would just suggest and encourage that you'll want to have a sense of what you want your life to look like in the future. That helps as a sort of a North Star. And you know all about this, Anne, because you do this work. And so you want that. The way you teach it is awesome. I love your process. It is so good. So good. And, the other thing, a lot of what we were talking about is finding time for stillness. And then what you do in that time with stillness, like journaling, meditation, prayer, contemplation, whatever your things are. Taking time off is important, especially driven people. We do not want to drive ourselves to burnout. You did a podcast recently. Somebody spoke a lot about how people are feeling burnt out and they push it to the limits. So, burnout is avoided when you have a strong foundation, knowing how much time you should work in a day and just getting really clear about that and strong on your boundaries around that. Knowing that, just because you're working 10, 12 hours doesn't mean you're doing good work. There's no gold medal for how many hours you work. There's the gold medal goes to the person who has the best types of results. And usually that comes from clear thinking and creativity. Preparing, just being prepared. We suggest you prepare every night for the next day. And, that gets into your subconscious. So that's useful. Having support, doing only high energy work, not low energy work. So always delegating or not doing $25 an hour work, as we say. And then just showing up in life with humility. Sometimes we think we're humble. A lot of the driven people that I encounter, I like to ask, where do you think you stand on humble personally? And usually because they're feeling somewhat humble, they rank themselves not the highest of humility, but pretty high. And sometimes when they ask people close to them in their lives, they find out that their self-view isn't actually how other people are seeing them. And so that's a really important thing to know. And then, to learn and have self-awareness on how you can show up differently for people with compassion and love without judgment, because again, that's all that really matters in life. So yeah, that's what those disciplines are about.
Which one has been the most impactful for you personally?
Well, I think early on, what we call 10-year thinking vision, our 10-year thinking vision, I think because I started doing that 30 years ago, and I did it with my wife, which is of course what you teach. And I thought that was really impactful because I started doing it on my own. And then at some point, luckily I realized it pretty quick that all the things I was envisioning had to do with me. I didn't
Mhm.
even know if she was interested in any of those things.
Oh,
And I thought it
yeah.
might be a good idea if we were on the same page. And so, we started doing it together and co-creating. And that, helped, as I said before, sort of as a North Star for the two of us. It helped us raise our kids. It helped us enhance our relationship together because we were always co-creating. And it just felt so good, like that we were on similar paths, even though our paths had some differences, where we could support each other. And it was, so it's been really impactful. Later in life, I think respecting my time more, really understanding the value of my time. And as it related to business, what that was literally worth. Like, what was my hourly rate and what did I want it to be? Were the activities that I was doing, in alignment with what my hourly rate was or what I wanted it to be? And it was a wake up call because I realized a lot of the stuff I was doing was not high impact stuff. And it was not going to help move the needle for me and with my income or, with growing the asset value of my business. I was just doing low energy, low impact stuff and filling my days with it because I couldn't say no, which is another one of the disciplines. And so learning what to say yes to and what to say no to and saying no to most of the stuff and realizing that, yeah, you might disappoint some people and that's okay. I realized I had to be okay with that I couldn't be everybody's hero. That wasn't going to actually serve them or me. And so, those are some of the things that were most impactful for me.
How has your definition of success changed over the years?
That's such a great question because early on, for many decades, now remember, I started my company when I was 21. So when I say many decades, it was in my 40s. I, I never felt like I was enough, and
Mm.
I never felt like the company was successful because I had a certain idea of what I thought that meant. And I had certain companies and people that I looked at that I guess was what I thought it was supposed to be. And so I was never satisfied. And and that was frustrating. So I was frustrated a lot. I could think about our EOS quarterly planning sessions and how often I was frustrated in those because I felt like we weren't meeting our potential. But, then in my 40s, I started to let go. I don't know if I was just exhausted or I don't know what was going on, but my business partner, Joel, and we just started giving it up. We just started saying, look, we're going to set these goals and it's the right thing to do. The rocks. But we're not going to beat ourselves up if they don't materialize. And we're just going to go back to what you and I were talking about earlier. We're just going to realize that these are just the lessons that we're learning. And let's embrace these lessons and let's just get better. And when we did that, we started doing better. And so that's my only point of reference around letting go and just noticing. And, eventually, as I got into my later 40s, I realized I wasn't really the best person to be running the company anymore. And just coming to terms with that and deciding that we were going to try to find somebody. But what we did in that process was we let go. And so we actually weren't recruiting. We said, this was our way of saying it. So, take it for what it's worth, whoever's listening and but we just said, we're putting it out there. We're going to see what happens, meaning we're putting it out to something greater than us. So if there's a person out there to come in here and run this company, have him show up or her. And Through a series of synchronicities, we met somebody, and that person ended up joining our company and is now running the company. And they truly were synchronicity. The events were remarkable.
Yeah.
And when I look back on my whole business career, everything was synchronicity. I have a whole story I do for the team at Image One where I connect all the dots of the things that you don't even think about in the moment, but had a huge impact. It's a fun exercise if any of the listeners want to do that. Just go back on your career and think about all the twists and turns and how all the unexpected that led you to your great successes. You know, I was doing this podcast, my own podcast, and Gino Wickman was a guest. He didn't want to be a guest on any podcast. I think it was the first podcast he ever did, and he thought I did a good job. So when he wrote one of his books, he asked if I would interview him for a bonus section of that book. It was called The EOS Life. And so they hired me, the publishing company, to do it. And that's where I learned about the 10 disciplines. And that is where we decided to, do something with them and turn it into a workshop, and ended up writing a book and we have a mastermind that we run, and we have a podcast called Shed and Shine Podcast. And, we have, et cetera. I do one-to-one coaching, a 12-month program called The Journey with people. I don't even know how any of this happened. It was not part of the plan. None of it was planned. This is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no VTO for any of this,
Yeah.
but it was in my vision. And that was, to pay attention and allow things to unfold and
Yeah.
see where it takes me, and be open and come show up with an open heart and an open mind. So there you go.
Beautiful.
I mean, what the heck are you doing with your program? I mean, come on. Did you
Like,
map that out, when you were 20? No. Right? Could you imagine if someone when you were in your 20s said, this is what you're going to be doing? You would have
what are you
said, what?
smoking?
What are you talking?
What's something that you've said no to recently
Mm,
and why?
yeah, that's a good question. I've said no to a lot of podcasts, and it isn't because they aren't good podcasts, but I just need to, and I love speaking with people about this. It's fun, but it's a hard decision because, I'm always happy to hop on and talk about things, but, I have to value my time. So, that's what's most important. So I have to make that hard choice. So that's an example. Um, I socially, we might be asked to go have dinner with another couple or something like that.
Yeah.
And, if I don't feel good energy around that, that's a no. And, I share that because I think for some of us in our lives, that's a really hard thing to do. Maybe they're friends, you've known them a while, and, you don't want to disappoint them. So you give up, 4 or 5 hours of your life. But I always just have to ask myself, where's my energy better served? And how is this energy going to carry over tomorrow? If I have an energy draining social engagement the next day, I just might not be as good to others. And I want to always manage my energy appropriately. And I think that's part of saying no. You're really just managing your energy. And sometimes that means you're going to disappoint some people, but you have to realize that, that's for them to deal with, I guess, or work through. I guess that's their lesson. Not that I'm here to give lessons, that's for sure. But, I get disappointed too. People say no to me too. That's just a lesson for me. I'm not holding that against over anybody's head. So I think that's a good way to approach life in general.
And you're talking about managing your energy. What are some things like, let's just say there's something that you have an obligation that you need to say yes to, but you know it's going to affect your energy. What are some things that you would do or that you might recommend the listener do to reset their energy?
Well, first, that's for sure going to happen. So, you know, you have to just discern in life, obviously, and then you have a family engagement and you're sort of dreading it, but it's the right thing to show up because there's important people there that will feel good that you're there. So, you know, how can you show up and be your best? And there's lots of ways. So, one thing is you can get quiet, sit in a chair, just breathe, focus on your breath for some period of time. You can set an intention during that time that you're going to show up with compassion and love, that any of the little things, the little thing that Uncle Johnny says that's off color, you're going to breathe in his off colorness and you're going to breathe out love and compassion to him. And you can experience that almost as if you're living outside of yourself when you're in a situation like that. You're grounded, you're of this earth, but you're experiencing it in a whole different way. You can sit down and journal and write your intentions. You can maybe fold up a piece of paper, put it in your pocket and keep it close to your heart or close to your body. You could grab a rock from your property or wherever and hold the rock and just say, this rock will serve as a reminder for me to show up with love and compassion. And if at any time I'm feeling, frustration or anything of that nature, I'll hold this rock and bring back really beautiful energy, powerful energy. So you could do simple things like that. Maybe it sounds corny to some, I don't know, but find your alternative that isn't corny. I don't know.
I love it.
Bottom line is, these are just other humans just like you. And I learned that at a meditation retreat, decades ago. And it was a practice. And the practice that the teacher led us through was to think about other people in your life and the things that annoy you about them. And then remember that they want the same things in life you do. They're just like you. So you say, just like me. They want safety, just like me. They want security, just like me. They want to be healthy, just like me. They want to be prosperous, just like me. They want to be loved unconditionally, just like me. They're just like me. Even that person that you have determined in your life or from afar that is so not like you, they are actually just like you.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, it is. It is. But listen, you know what? What's the alternative? We're not perfect. We have our things. That's the point. Those people, especially the ones that, have the most, that seem to annoy us the most, they're here to teach us a lesson. And it's a deep, deep lesson. Because when we walk away from our social engagement and we're speaking with our spouse, and I'm guilty of this as much as the next person. Did you see Uncle Johnny? Can you believe when he said that? What's going through his head? But then you might pause and say, wait a second, hold on. Have I ever said something that wasn't, the best thing to say? Absolutely. I don't know where Uncle Johnny is, what his situation is in life, So who am I to sit here and judge? That's not right. I wouldn't want somebody judging me. I try to show up and be a good person. I'm assuming Uncle Johnny's trying on some level to do the same thing. We don't want to be judged. That never feels good. So, the more energy we put into that, the more that's going to come to us. So these are just practices and they are hard sometimes, but then they get easy. Because after you do it for a while, like I've done a lot of work on judgment. And at first it was like judgment of people that I actually care a lot about. But for some reason I was still judging them. And then it was judgment on people that, I kind of knew, but not that great. And then there was judgment of people I had no idea about, like you see them on TV or whatnot. And, you're making judgments. Now I worked through those for the most part. Then I started to notice I was judging people when I was walking around town. I'd say, why does that person property, why don't they take care of their property better? What's going on with them? Or, you know, all these little, you just start to notice all these little judgments that are popping in your mind all day long that you didn't even realize, and how exhausting that is for us. Because why? What's the point? There's no point in it. What are you going to do? What am I going to do? Go knock on the person's door and have a conversation with them about why I don't think their property looks good? Who cares what I think? It's what they think that matters. They don't care what they're fine with their property, or
Yeah.
who knows? What's the point of even trying to figure it out? And what makes me so special? Because I mow my lawn. That makes me special? No, I'm sorry. That has nothing to do with being a good person mowing your lawn. I know I'm saying everything that's obvious to every single person listening right now, but it's funny because we do these things,
Yeah,
you know,
guilty of it.
and so, yeah, so we swallow the pill, and then we realize we don't need the pill. It's, it's too painful to judge people. It isn't worth it. And you just realize that that doesn't feel good anymore.
Okay, Rob, before we wrap up, will you tell us what is on the horizon for you? What are you excited about? What are you working on? Got going.
Yeah. Nothing. I know that sounds funny, and
Love it.
it probably doesn't, it's probably everyone thinks I'm joking, but I really don't know, and I'm curious. So I have the things I do, and I'm trying to live what I shared with you today, which is I'm trying to leave space to see what falls into me and where that might take me. And like I said, sometimes it's pretty uncomfortable. And I've been working on just being with that discomfort and seeing where that leads me. So I don't know. And I'm really excited about
I love that for you.
it. What's
So
wrong? You don't love that for you?
I could work on getting there. That's an opportunity for improvement for me.
It's hysterical.
I think that is probably something that a lot of people that are listening are thinking like, "Oh, I could get there one day. I need to I almost like I have to earn it to be able to get to where you are," right? Like I have to hustle now to try to get to this place where I can just be and be curious and
Yeah. Well, maybe that's true. I don't know that it's true. It might be true because that's what the person listening has decided has to be true. I think whatever's true to you is what's true. And so just ask yourself wherever it is that you're trying to go. Now I'm going to get a little deep here. If you were to die tomorrow, would you feel good about where you left off? Meaning you weren't driving yourself so hard that if somebody said to you, "Hey, you have a week to live," that you wouldn't go, "Oh my God, what the heck what was I doing with my life?" That's a big wake up call. I'm not going to spend the rest of my week alive doing any of that stuff. If that's what you're saying, then you're taking for granted that tomorrow's a guarantee. And I think it's not. I know it's not.
yeah.
It just feels like it is. But if we can reframe things, I'm not trying to be dramatic. We have things that we have to live our lifestyles and, have practical things we need to take care of. So again, use discernment, but just be really clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the energy that you're putting into it is the right energy. And the sacrifices that you're making are worth the sacrifice. If our kids see us as really hard workers, but they don't feel attended to or loved without judgment, and because you teach this and you show up with your kids, I know the things you do. It's pretty amazing. Then, your priorities are out of whack, obviously. Your kids don't care what kind of house you live in. They care that you love them without judgment. And then they like your nice house.
Yeah.
They just think, when they're young, they just think it's nice to have a nice house.
Yeah.
They don't probably think mom and dad love me without judgment. They just inherently know that. What a beautiful thing to have your kids just feel safe and not have to even analyze that. So that's what's most important. And any sacrifices, and if you don't have kids, it's the same thing with loved ones and all that kind of stuff, and yourself, by the way. You all know all the stuff you get, everything you're driving towards, you all know none of it matters. It's just nice. It's just added comfort on top of added comfort. That's all it is. And nobody cares about it once you're gone, or they might
Yep.
fight over it or something. That's their problem. You're gone. You can't take it with you. Everybody says that, and you all know that. So, yeah, back to your original question. I think that maybe recognize where you're at in your life on your path, and just use the things you're learning through podcasts like yours to use good discernment.
Rob, if the listener, if they're listening and they want to get in touch with you, they want to learn more about the work that you're doing, about the mastermind, your courses, your books, what's the best way to get in touch with you, to follow you, to learn more?
You can't. No, I'm just sorry. You have to search the internet and figure it out on your own. You could Google my name. I'm sure you'd find me. But yes, you can go to the 10disciplines.com. You can learn all about the things that Gino and I are doing there. You can go to robdube.com and you can contact me there. So all the places. Um, but thanks for allowing me to share that so people can check into what I'm up to if they're interested.
And we'll drop those links into the show notes as well.
All right, that's great.
It has been such a pleasure spending time with you, Rob. I love every conversation that we've ever had. So thank you for
Yeah.
joining us today and sharing your wisdom and joy with us.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for all the work that you do. It's inspirational, truly, and I know you're changing people's lives. Literally, generations of people, family generations are changing because they're coming and working with you. Um, it's inspiring. It's a really beautiful thing.
Thanks for tuning in to Empowered Living. I hope today's conversation sparked some inspiration and gave you tools to live more intentionally in your family, work, and life. If you enjoyed our episode today, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story or actionable takeaway. And if you know someone who would love this episode, share it with them. Because living an intentional life is better when we do it together. Until next time, remember, the life you want doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice. Let's keep creating it one step at a time.